After his sister's death, her husband became his legal guardian. Julian wired a six-figure sum into Leo's account every month with only one stipulation: don't be like your sister. His sister had thrown herself from a building for a man. So, when Leo was summoned to the dean's office for drawing explicit gay art commissions online, Julian made his first ever appearance at the school. The dean was a young woman, not long out of grad school herself, and entirely unprepared for the sheer presence Julian commanded. A flush crept up her neck as she tried to articulate the problem. She explained that while the school understood artistic freedom, Leo's work was perhaps a bit too graphic in scale. She pushed Leo's tablet across the desk. On the screen was the unfinished sketch of a commissioned piece. The Passion of a Saint, requested to be both holy and profane. Leo's grasp of anatomy was strong, and the resulting image had a visceral impact. Julian's gaze lingered on the screen for a long moment before shifting to Leo. He asked if he was short on money. Leo ran his tongue over his back teeth and said nothing. The allowance Julian gave him was more than enough to live lavishly in New York City. Claiming poverty would be an absurd lie. Julian then wondered aloud if it was some kind of special hobby. Leo just shrugged, thinking to himself that his greatest hobby was spending Julian's money. Sensing the mounting tension, the dean tried to mediate. She explained that the issue wasn't about censoring Leo's art, but that an anonymous complaint had been filed. Leo was taking private commissions from classmates, which was creating a negative environment. Julian extended two fingers, turning the tablet back towards himself. His fingertip tapped the dimple in the small of the suffering angel's back. He commented that the draftsmanship was excellent. He even zoomed in to inspect the details before looking up at Leo, his expression calm, and asked if he had tried the pose himself. Leo nearly slid out of his chair. The dean's professional mask cracked. Julian, however, acted as if nothing unusual had happened. He powered down the tablet and handed it back to Leo. He stated that since it was a private commission, they shouldn't take up any more of the dean's time and assured her he would handle Leo's discipline. He stood, straightening the collar of Leo's crooked sweatshirt. He told Leo it was time to go home. The command was delivered with the finality of a death sentence. Leo trailed behind him, a silent prayer on his lips. Inside Julian's black Maybach, the driver, Mr. Henderson, caught his eye in the rearview mirror. The pity in the older man's gaze was so thick it was practically spilling over. Leo shrank into the corner, pretending to be absorbed by the passing cityscape. As they passed a block of food trucks near the campus, a memory of his sister, Clara, surfaced. She had loved the tacos from one particular truck, always insisting on a double order of cotija cheese. After she died, Julian bought the truck. It never opened again. The car moved smoothly towards their penthouse in a gleaming midtown skyscraper. The moment they were inside, Julian shrugged off his suit jacket. He told Leo to go take a shower. Leo found his eyes drawn to the broad expanse of Julian's back and the lean taper of his waist. Clara used to say that Julian had the kind of body that would look good even draped in a burlap sack. Leo mumbled an affirmation and tried to escape to his room, tablet in hand. Julian's voice stopped him, instructing him to leave the device on the coffee table. There was no escape. He reluctantly surrendered the instrument of his crime, his mind racing. Would he be sleeping on the couch tonight, or should he just run away? The couch would be uncomfortable, but running away would mean having his cards frozen. Neither option was good. Julian went to the kitchen and retrieved a bottle of chilled water from the stainless steel refrigerator. As he drank, his throat moved, and the pale bone of his wrist was exposed beneath his shirt cuff. On it was a Patek Philippe watch, a 27th birthday gift from Clara. She had dragged Leo through every high-end jeweler in the city for 2 weeks to find it. Sometimes, Leo thought Julian was less a person and more a living museum of his sister's possessions. When Leo emerged from his shower, the living room was lit by a single, dim floor lamp. Julian sat on the sofa. In front of him, on the glass coffee table, was the tablet. The screen was on, displaying another one of his commissions. This one was far more explicit. The client had a peculiar fetish for priests and demons. To earn a bonus, Leo had incorporated every possible religious artifact alongside demonic tails and horns, creating a tangled, chaotic scene. Julian patted the cushion next to him. It was not a request. Leo moved over, sitting down with half a person's distance between them. The plush sofa sank, making him feel small and powerless. Julian's eyes remained on the screen. He asked if these images were drawn purely from imagination. Leo muttered that it wasn't like he could find people to practice with. Julian countered, asking why not. He reminded Leo of the saying that art imitates life. Leo was speechless for a moment before retorting, questioning Julian's right to lecture him on art. He told him to look at the screen and see if it deserved to be called art, labeling it cybererotica instead. Julian slid the screen back to the image of the suffering saint. He noted that the client wanted an expression of both pain and pleasure, and then told Leo that he was incapable of drawing it. Leo bristled. He insisted that once he graduated, he would be able to draw it, boasting that his experience would surely surpass Julian's. He had seen the canvases hidden away in Julian's study. They were faceless, but the musculature, the tension, the texture of sweat-slicked skin, they were clearly the work of someone intimately familiar with the male form. At this, a low laugh rumbled in Julian's chest. He turned his head, his usually cool and ascetic face taking on a dangerous edge. He asked if Leo was so sure, pointing out that he couldn't even get the basics right. Leo protested, arguing that his work was highly praised in his online circles, with a long waiting list for his commissions. Julian's critique was sharp. He stated that Leo's suffering figures only showed pain, not pleasure, and his tangled bodies had form but no soul. Leo muttered under his breath that for all Julian's talk, he was still a virgin at 30. The words hung in the air. The hint of amusement vanished from Julian's face. He looked away from Leo, his gaze returning to the tablet. He repeated the word virgin, tasting it. Then he gave an order, sweatshirt off. Leo's mind went blank, but his body moved on instinct, pulling the oversized garment over his head. Julian seemed unsatisfied and commanded him to continue. Leo searched the man's glacial expression for any sign of a joke and found none. Resigned, he closed his eyes and pulled off his t-shirt as well, leaving his upper body bare. The September evening air was cool against his skin. Julian finally looked up from the tablet, his eyes appraising Leo's form. Leo hunched his back self-consciously. Julian's verdict was simple, too thin. He said it like he was assessing a product that had failed to meet his expectations, asking if all the money he provided went to art supplies. Leo confirmed he had bought a new digital display, which Julian noted was used to draw things like this. He told Leo to stand up straight. Before Leo could react, Julian was on his feet, setting the tablet upright on the coffee table so the screen faced him. He instructed Leo to spread his feet to shoulder width. Gritting his teeth, Leo reluctantly complied. Julian moved behind him, referencing the priest and demon drawing, recalling how the demon's tail was wrapped around the priest's leg. His palm pressed against Leo's back, sliding slowly down, past his waist, stopping at his tailbone. He asked softly if this was where the tail would grow from. Leo flinched. He begged him not to touch him any lower. No one knew that the priest in his drawings was modeled after Julian. Any more of this and he would lose control. Julian feigned innocence, asking why he couldn't touch him there, commenting on the beautiful structure beneath his fingers. He questioned if Leo had ever seen himself from this angle. This was too much. Was this some kind of practical anatomy lesson? Taking advantage of Julian's momentary pause, Leo shoved him away, shouting that it was a foul. Julian let out a soft chuckle. He reminded Leo that he was the one who had brought up his virginity, the one who had provoked him. It was too late now to cry foul. Before Leo could retort, he was pushed face down onto the sofa, his body positioned in a way that reminded him of the actors in certain films. Julian's voice was close to his ear, asking if the character was supposed to have tears in his eyes as well. Then came a sharp slap against his rear. Leo froze, stunned. It was followed by several more. It wasn't the pain that bothered him. It was the humiliation, a sensation far worse than any physical sting. No one had ever spanked him. His parents died young. His sister had spoiled him, and Julian had rarely even spoken a harsh word to him. Julian told him to cry for him. He placed the tablet in front of Leo's face, asking why he couldn't produce tears when looking at his own art. Leo bit his lip, his face burning. It was a ridiculous request. A grown man, nearly 20, crying because he was spanked? He would be a laughingstock at school. Julian hadn't really expected him to cry. He calmly began to unbuckle his belt. Alarm bells screamed in Leo's head. He struggled to get up. A knee pressed into the small of his back, pinning him down. His pants were unfastened, and cool air rushed in. The belt in Julian's hand looked heavy. He didn't use it to restrain him, but traced the cold metal buckle along the exposed skin of his lower back. A plea escaped Leo's lips. Not that. It was dirty. His misophobia was severe, and even with his crush on Julian, he couldn't stomach it. Julian paused, asking what he should use instead. On a delirious impulse, Leo blurted out that he should use a tie, reminding him he had plenty of Hermes ones that were surely cleaner. The moment the words were out, he wanted to bite his own tongue off. What was he saying? He was supplying his own props. Julian raised an eyebrow, his tone laced with amusement as he wondered aloud what sort of sordid things occupied Leo's mind. Leo froze, realizing his mistake. He had completely misread the situation. Just then, the doorbell rang. His sweatshirt and t-shirt were still on the floor. He and Julian were in a compromising position. If a familiar face saw this, he would die of embarrassment on the spot. He whispered frantically, asking who it was. Julian, slowly refastening his belt and adjusting his shirt back to its immaculate state, answered just as slowly that it was probably the cleaning lady who had forgotten something. That was a lie, Mrs. Gable had her own key. Leo scrambled to his feet, grabbing his sweatshirt and pulling it on. He urged Julian to do something. Julian, now perfectly composed, walked to the entryway and checked the video intercom. His face hardened. Leo crept over and peered at the screen. It was a woman, exquisitely dressed, emanating an aura of refined intelligence. She held an expensive-looking fruit basket. He recognized her. Annabelle Vance, the woman Julian's mother had arranged for him to meet. A daughter of an equally powerful family. Julian opened the door and let her in. Her gaze swept the foyer, landing on Leo's hastily kicked-off sneakers by the shoe cabinet. A new limited-ion pair Julian had bought for him. Julian explained that he had a guest. His nephew. The lie was so blatant it was almost comical. Since when did he have an uncle? Leo, clutching his half-fastened pants, scrambled into his room, losing a slipper in his haste. He thought he heard Julian chuckle softly and tell Annabelle that the kid was just shy. The sound of water being poured filled the silence. In the living room, their conversation was stilted, revolving around work and their parents' health. Leo pressed his ear to the door, peeking through the crack. On the sofa, the throw pillows were still in disarray from their earlier struggle, and his cheap t-shirt lay discarded like evidence at a crime scene. Annabelle's gaze drifted in that direction several times. He was certain she had seen the crumpled shirt. A woman's intuition was more accurate than radar in these matters. Panic churned in his stomach. Should he storm out and declare his territory? No, that was foolish. It would expose them and humiliate him in front of Julian. But could he just stand by and watch them? That was even less bearable. As he agonized, he heard Julian's voice, cool and final. It was getting late, and she should be going. Clear dismissal. It seemed his fears were unfounded. The iceberg was an iceberg to everyone. Annabelle's voice held a note of hurt as she asked if he truly disliked her that much. She confessed that her visit was at his mother's behest, to ask about their engagement. Engagement. A roar filled Leo's ears. A white-hot fury shot up from his feet. He threw the door open. Both Julian and Annabelle turned to look at him. He was barefoot, wearing only the sweatshirt, his pants hanging loosely on his hips, the fly still undone. He walked directly to Julian, and in front of Annabelle sat down squarely on his lap. He wrapped his arms around his neck, his voice deliberately long and cloying. "Uncle," he whined, "my butt hurts. Can you rub it for me?" Julian's entire body went rigid. Annabelle's expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to a mask of livid fury. She stared at Leo on Julian's lap, at his unzipped pants, at the faint red marks on his neck from their earlier scuffle. Her carefully constructed facade finally shattered. She stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. It was Julian who recovered first. He pinched the soft flesh at Leo's waist, his most ticklish spot. Leo giggled, melting against him. Julian hissed at him to stop, but made no move to push him away. Annabelle finally found her voice, asking what this was. Julian was unflappable. He stated calmly that it was exactly as it seemed. He was gay, and therefore could never marry her. Annabelle shot to her feet with a sharp cry. She shrieked that he would regret this, that his family would never accept such a scandal. She slammed the fruit basket onto the floor, grabbed her purse, and stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against the marble. The door slammed shut with a deafening crash. Silence. Leo let out a long breath and slid off Julian's lap. The moment his feet touched the floor, his legs gave out. Adrenaline had been the only thing holding him up. Now, a tidal wave of fear washed over him. Had Julian told the truth about being gay? Or was it just a ploy to avoid the marriage? And he had just committed an act of utter rebellion. Julian said his name, his full name. Leo flinched. Julian told him to fix his pants. Looking down, Leo saw his fly was still wide open. A hot blush flooded his face. He quickly turned his back, fumbling with the zipper. In his haste, it got stuck. A pair of footsteps stopped behind him. A large hand covered his, and Julian's fingertips brushed against his lower abdomen. With a deft movement, he slid the zipper up. He told Leo that he didn't object to him liking men, or even to him dating. He had only one rule. Don't end up like your sister. Don't throw everything away for a man. His sister, Clara, had fallen in love with another man in the second year of her contract marriage to Julian. She had been honest with him. Julian had said nothing, simply agreeing to the divorce. His only condition was that Leo remain in his care. He had argued that it would be inconvenient for a single woman to raise him. But Leo knew Julian was a shrewd businessman who never made a losing deal. He was the add-on to the transaction. On the day of her divorce, Clara received a huge sum of money and a condo from Julian. Later, she died, leaping from the 18th floor. It was only after Leo went on a hunger strike that Julian told him the truth. The man was a con artist. He had not only faked the marriage proposal but also a pregnancy. The man's real wife had found Clara, beaten her until she miscarried, and driven her into a depression that ended in her death. For a long time, Julian was the only family he had. He clung to him, a vine wrapped around a solitary, dead tree. But even dead trees could sometimes bloom, and this was one tree he didn't want bearing fruit for anyone else. Leo whirled around, glaring at him. He demanded to know what Julian meant by for a man. Julian's brow furrowed, seemingly surprised by his reaction. He simply said not to repeat her mistakes. Leo's voice rose. He asked if Julian truly didn't know why his sister died. If she had possessed even half of his cold-blooded indifference, she would never have been scammed out of her life. Julian's face went pale. A storm of emotions Leo couldn't decipher churned in his usually placid eyes. He asked if that was how Leo saw him, as cold and heartless. A self-mocking smile touched his lips as he advanced on Leo, who instinctively backed away. Julian questioned Leo's belief that he was kept around only because of his sister. Leo shot back. Wasn't it true? His sister wanted a divorce, and to avoid a loss, Julian had kept him. Julian grabbed his wrist and pulled him into the study, forcing him into a chair. From a locked drawer, he produced a file and threw it in front of him. It was a prenuptial agreement. He told him to read Section 6, Clause 3. Leo flipped to the section on asset division. The terms were standard until he reached the third clause. If the marital relationship was terminated due to the wife's actions, she would receive assets valued at no less than $50 million. On the condition that legal guardianship of her brother, Leo, be unconditionally transferred to the husband until Leo reached the age of 25. His mind roared. He wasn't an add-on. He was the payment. He was the price his sister had paid Julian for her freedom and her new love. Julian looked down at him, his voice cutting. He told Leo she hadn't done it for some damned love. She had done it to get rid of him, her burden. No, Leo whispered, tears falling without. You're lying. My sister wasn't like that. Julian's response was quiet. You know what she was like better than I do. He was right. All his life, Leo had been deceiving himself, unable to face the truth that his sister had never truly loved him. He looked up at Julian, his voice thick with unshed tears. Uncle, he began, the word tasting of ashes. He asked if Julian was going to get married now, and if so, would he abandon him just like his sister did? The last words were barely a whisper. Julian sighed. He reached out and caught a tear with the palm of his hand. He promised he would not abandon him, nor would he marry anyone else. Leo blinked, asking why. A man like Julian, at the pinnacle of society, with wealth, looks, and status, couldn't be allowed by his family to remain single forever. He didn't answer the question directly. Instead, he leaned down, and his warm lips met the corner of Leo's eye, gently kissing away the salty wetness. Leo froze, feeling the soft brush of his breath against his eyelashes. Julian lifted his head, their foreheads touching. In the depths of his dark eyes, Leo saw his own terrified reflection. Because Julian murmured, his voice a low vibration between them, I already have someone to raise. And raising one is more than enough work. Leo fled, locking himself in his room, forgetting all about his tablet. Lying in bed, he tossed and turned, Julian's words echoing in his mind. What did they mean? Was it a confession? It was the strangest confession he had ever heard of. He pulled the covers over his head, trying to suffocate the thoughts, but it was useless. He sat up and opened his browser, typing, "Is it perverse for a guardian to fall for their ward?" The search results were a chaotic mix of legal statutes, psychological analyses, and plot summaries for daytime dramas. A notification popped up on his phone. It was from the client who had commissioned The Priest and Demon piece. The username was Top Dollar Daddy. The message read, "Dude, saw the first draft. The Priest is so perfectly repressed. I love it. But can you make the demon a little more debauched? Like pure but also slutty?" Slutty. The image of himself writhing on Julian's lap flashed in his mind. He threw the phone across the room and buried his face in a pillow. He had made a complete fool of himself. Predictably, he didn't sleep at all. The next day in the studio at school, his best friend, Liam, draped an arm around his neck. Liam's voice was a conspiratorial whisper as he asked about the parent-teacher conference. He wanted to know who had shown up, the legendary elusive brother-in-law. Leo shoved his arm off, correcting him curtly. He wasn't his brother-in-law. Liam raised an eyebrow, noting how quickly he was distancing himself. He asked if they had fought. Leo told him it was none of his business and attacked his digital canvas with a furious brushstroke. Unfazed, Liam leaned closer, peering at the screen. He let out a low whistle, commenting on the sudden shift in Leo's art style. On the screen was a chaotic sketch. The holy priest's robes were torn, a golden crucifix chain broken and tangled around his pale neck. The demon's black wings enveloped him completely, sharp nails drawing red lines on his skin. The priest's face was still blank, a canvas for an expression Leo couldn't decide on, pain or pleasure. The image of Julian's face involuntarily appeared in his mind, and his cheeks grew hot again. He quickly shut off the display, telling Liam to stop looking. Liam just grinned, saying he was only curious because the priest looked vaguely familiar. Not his face, he clarified, but his aura. He snapped his fingers. It was that specific vibe, the kind of man who looks intensely proper and disciplined on the outside, but was, in fact, a tightly coiled spring of raw passion. Leo shoved him away, telling him he was the one with a dirty mind. Liam insisted, asking if the man who picked him up yesterday wasn't the model for the drawing. Leo denied everything, but Liam was triumphant, patting his shoulder. He said he had seen the car and the man's imposing figure from the street below. He teased Leo, marveling at how bold he was, using his guardian as a muse for such material. He wondered if Leo was afraid of getting his legs broken if Julian found out. Broken legs would be the least of his worries. If Julian discovered that the priest was him, and the conquering demon was Leo's fantasy version of himself, he would likely be fed into an industrial shredder. Liam waved a hand in front of his flushed face, asking what he was thinking about. He pressed for details about what had happened after they went home. He noted Leo's distracted state and made a crude gesture, asking if Julian had actually done something to him. Leo threw an eraser at him, telling him to get lost. Liam dodged it easily, laughing as he settled in front of his own easel. Getting serious for a moment, he asked if his guardian knew he liked men, and if he had, in fact, done anything to him. Leo ran a hand through his hair in frustration. He admitted Julian hadn't done anything to him, but had said he wasn't going to get married. Liam paused for a second, then burst out laughing. He asked if Leo seriously thought Julian was staying single for him, telling him to get real. The friendship was on thin ice. Leo retorted that he didn't think that, and besides, Julian had told the woman he was gay. Liam just shrugged. He pointed out that gay men could still get married for convenience, especially someone of his status, for the sake of a family alliance. It was perfectly normal. And it was. That was exactly how his sister had married him. A dull ache spread through his chest, like a slow, bloodless wound. After class, he didn't call for a ride. He walked to a cemetery in Queens where his sister was buried. The photograph on her headstone was from her 18th birthday, her smile as bright and brilliant as a stolen summer sun. He sat on a nearby step and pulled a piece of saltwater taffy from his pocket. He spoke softly to the cold stone, asking why she hadn't shared any of the $50 million she had sold him for. He then asked if she knew her ex-husband was gay. He told her that he had kissed him. The wind rustled the fallen leaves, but there was no answer. He chewed the candy to shreds as silent tears streamed down his face. The sugar did nothing to combat the bitterness. His phone rang. It was Liam. He was shouting, asking where he was, saying Julian was blowing up his phone and had even gone to his father's office to find him. He begged Leo not to do anything stupid. Liam's father was a vice chair of the city's arts council and had business dealings with Julian. Julian had gone to him. That was insane. Then Leo remembered. In his embarrassment last night, he had blocked Julian's number. A sudden gust of wind chilled him. As he put his phone away, he heard the sound of steady footsteps approaching from behind. The sky had grown dark. He waited, and a pair of immaculately polished black leather shoes came into his line of sight. Julian's voice was low. "Leo." He looked up. He asked how Julian found him. Julian knelt, his eyes level with Leo's, and replied that finding him was never difficult. He asked why he hadn't answered his phone. Leo turned his face towards the headstone, muttering that he didn't want to. Julian's gaze fell on Clara's photo. He asked if Leo was afraid of him. Leo scoffed at the idea. Julian noted that it was good he came to visit her. Leo snapped back, asking if he needed to report his visits to his sister's grave to him now. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, his voice laced with sarcasm. Julian ignored the jibe. He reached out to touch Leo's face, but Leo flinched away. Julian's hand froze midair before he slowly retracted it. He told Leo the ground was cold and that he should get up. Leo refused to move. When Julian repeated the command, Leo's defiance hardened. He asked if Julian was going to show him the proof that he'd been sold for $50 million. After all, Annabelle was gone, but Julian's mother would surely find another candidate. He could collect a whole stable of younger brothers. He spat that Julian was a liar, just like his sister. Julian simply watched him. When Leo was finished, he told him it was time to go home. Leo struggled, pushing against him with all his might, shouting that he wouldn't go, that it was Julian's house, not his. In one fluid motion, Julian lifted him and slung him over his shoulder. Leo cursed, pounding on his back, calling him a perverted old man. But Julian was like a block of iron, unmoving. He deposited Leo into the car and got in beside him, locking the doors. He told him to buckle up. When Leo refused, Julian leaned over him, his chest pressing down, the scent of his cologne filling Leo's senses. He held his breath until Julian clicked the belt into place and retreated. As the car pulled away from the cemetery, Leo watched the world blur past the window, his eyes burning again. A quiet voice from beside him said that it was okay to cry if he wanted to. Leo denied it, claiming he was just practicing holding his breath. His shoulders betrayed him with a slight tremble. A hand rested on his head, gently ruffling his hair. Julian's voice was soft. "Leo, don't be afraid. I won't leave you." He looked up, the dam of his composure finally breaking. Tears fell hot and fast. "What gives you the right?" He choked out, grabbing the front of Julian's shirt, all his pent-up grief and anger pouring out. "Why did my sister get to sell me for her freedom? Why does everyone think they can decide my life for me? You want to raise me? Fine." He scrambled across the seat and straddled Julian's lap. The car swerved slightly. "Mr." Henderson's terrified eyes flickered in the rearview mirror before snapping forward again, wishing he could will himself invisible. The veins on the back of Julian's hands stood out. He ordered Leo to get off. Leo refused, pressing forward and attacking his mouth in a kiss that was more of a desperate, clumsy assault, tasting of salty tears and reckless abandon. Julian turned his head, and Leo's teeth scraped against his jaw. "What are you trying to do?" Julian's voice was strained. "You," Leo snarled. "Aren't you gay? Don't you want to stay single? Don't you want to raise me? Here I am. Raise me, Mr." Henderson silently raised the privacy partition. Julian growled at the fully ascended barrier, asking if his driver had lost his mind along with his employee. The only response was the faint hum of the engine. Julian remained still, allowing Leo to sit on him, but his hands were clenched into tight fists at his sides. Leo taunted him, asking if he was scared. He deliberately shifted his hips, feeling the immediate tension in the muscles of Julian's thighs. He called him his sugar daddy, pointing out that he was a willing offering. Or was Julian disgusted by him? "Leo," Julian's voice was raw. "Get off me. No, you kissed me first. Don't you dare pretend to be a gentleman now." The accusation seemed to stun him. The turmoil in his eyes deepened. "You're right," he rasped. "I'm no gentleman." His voice dropped to a dark, confessional whisper. "From the first moment I saw you, I wanted to corrupt you. I want to hear you cry beneath me, scream my name. I want to lock you away where no one else can see you, where your eyes only have me in them." His blunt words shocked Leo into silence. The first time he saw him, that would have been the day he met with his sister. "I'm a pervert," Julian continued, his lips brushing against Leo's ear, each word a brand. "A monster, cold and heartless, just like your sister said. So, Leo, now's your chance to run. Before I truly lose my mind, get as far away as you can." Run? Where could he possibly run? From the moment his sister sold him, he had no home, no escape. His world had shrunk until it contained only this man. "I'm not running," he whispered, burying his face in the crook of Julian's neck, feeling the strong, steady pulse of his artery. "Julian, raise me, any way you want." Julian later explained that he had fallen for him the day Clara had arranged to meet him to discuss the details of their contract marriage. She was late. He was sitting by the window of a cafe when Leo, sweaty from a game of basketball, walked by in a faded school uniform, a worn-out art portfolio slung over his back. He had stared at Julian's iced Americano for a full 30 seconds. Julian's first thought was how beautiful the kid was. When Clara finally arrived, she introduced Leo as her little brother and asked if he could live with them after the wedding. Julian agreed without hesitation. At the time, his position in his family's company was still precarious. He was afraid of scaring Leo away, or worse, of losing control himself. So he chose the safest, most cumbersome method, marrying Clara to bring Leo into his life legitimately, as a dependent. He could watch him grow, protect him, and shield him from all the hardships of the world, all from a distance. He thought he could manage it. He never anticipated Clara would fall in love with someone else. But their prenuptial agreement had kept Leo by his side. When Leo asked what his feelings were for Clara, Julian's answer was simple: gratitude for letting me meet you. Julian's mother's matchmaking efforts became relentless. So Julian took him out of the country. They landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, where a black Bentley was waiting. As they drove towards the Saint-Germain-des-Prés district, Julian gave the driver instructions in fluent French. Leo leaned against the window, the unfamiliar streets making him uneasy. He asked why they were there. Julian, his eyes closed, said they were hiding out. Leo pressed, asking until when. Until she gives up, he replied, referring to his mother. Leo voiced his concern that his mother would just find a way to make his life hell back in the States. Julian opened his eyes and looked at him. That's why I brought you with me. The car stopped in front of a Haussmann-style apartment building. It was a top-floor duplex with a massive terrace overlooking most of Paris. Julian confirmed it was his. On the terrace, the evening breeze tousled Leo's hair. Below was the Seine, and in the distance, the Eiffel Tower began to sparkle. Do you like it? Julian's voice came from behind as he wrapped his arms around Leo's waist, his chin resting on his shoulder. From now on, this is our home. Trapped in his embrace, Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He stammered that the rent must be expensive and he couldn't afford it. I'll support you, Julian said. Those same two words again. Leo turned and pushed him away, insisting they needed to be clear about why Julian had brought him here. Was it just because of his mother's pressure? Julian led him to a rattan sofa on the terrace. Yes and no, he said, gently smoothing Leo's hair. Leo, you know what my mother is capable of. If she knew how I feel about you, what do you think she would do to you? A shiver ran down Leo's spine. Julian's mother was a notorious matriarch. She had ruthlessly dealt with his father's affair and illegitimate child. She would have no qualms about metaphorically sinking Leo in the Seine. From his pocket, Julian produced a velvet box. Inside was a simple, elegant platinum ring. Leo, same-sex marriage is legal in France. Here, we can be legal partners protected by law. Marry me. He couldn't believe it. They were married. Walking out of the city hall, his hand intertwined with Julian's, he felt completely dazed. Julian asked if he was all right. Leo just nodded numbly. The reality of it was too surreal. He needed to tell someone to confirm it wasn't a dream. He shakily pulled out his phone and called Liam. The call connected instantly. Leo, you're alive. Where the hell did you go? Liam's voice was a rapid-fire burst. Leo took a deep breath. Liam, I got married. 10 seconds of dead silence. Hello? Bad connection? What did you say? I said Leo got married. He yelled. Holy shit. The expletive echoed down the line. With who? Don't you dare tell me it was with your brother-in-law. It was. Another silence, longer this time. Where? It's not legal back home. Paris. Leo. Right now. Send me a picture. The certificate, the rings, the Eiffel Tower. I won't believe it otherwise. Leo glanced at Julian, who was watching him with an amused smile. Clearing his throat, he switched to the front camera and took a picture of their joined hands. The new ring on his finger prominent against the backdrop of the shimmering Seine and the distant tower. The moment the picture sent, a video call from Liam came through. He almost dropped the phone, but Julian answered it. Liam's shocked, distorted face filled the screen. No way, no way, no way. It's real, he screeched. When he saw Julian, he stammered a greeting. Julian simply nodded at him. He pulled Leo closer into his embrace and spoke to the camera, his voice smooth. From now on, I'm Leo's. As his friend, I trust you'll look out for him." Liam, flustered, mumbled that it was no problem, so long as Julian treated him right. That night, Leo called out to Julian as he was about to leave the bedroom. He told him he was cold sleeping alone. The hint was obvious. Julian stood silhouetted against the doorway for a long moment before walking back to the bed. The mattress dipped on the other side. 10 minutes passed in silence. Julian didn't move. Was he supposed to make the first move? Fine. He had fantasized about this enough. He took a deep breath, gathered his courage, and launched himself across the bed, wrapping himself around Julian like an octopus. He pinned him down and, mimicking scenes from movies, began to kiss him. Julian seemed stunned, but Leo pressed on, his tongue tracing the line of his throat. A low groan rumbled in Julian's chest, his body tensing. Encouraged, Leo grew bolder, his hands sliding inside Julian's silk robe, exploring the hard planes of his abdomen and the sharp line of his hips. Felt incredible. Just as his hand ventured into more dangerous territory, his wrist was seized in a powerful grip. In a blur of motion, their positions were reversed. He was pinned beneath Julian, whose body was a furnace against his. "What are you doing?" Julian's voice was a low growl. Leo mumbled that he was trying to help. "Help me?" Julian's hand slid down his spine, landing on his rear, giving it a light, possessive squeeze. "With this little skill, you don't even know how to take off clothes properly." Leo's face flushed. He tried to form a rebuttal, but no words came. "Leo," Julian murmured, "things like this are for the one in charge to teach you, don't you think?" "But you weren't doing anything," Leo protested. "I don't want to be a virgin for 30 years like you." The statement seemed to break the tension. A low laugh vibrated through Julian's chest, sending a thrill through Leo. "A virgin? All right. Then tonight, why don't you help me with that, Leo?" A sharp, sudden pain made him arch his back, trying to escape, but he was held fast. Julian's voice was laced with concern. He asked if he was bleeding. "No," Leo gasped, feeling his resolve melt away. "It's not blood." He buried his face in Julian's warm chest. He wasn't cold anymore. So, he mumbled indignantly into Julian's skin, biting him lightly. "Now who's the virgin?" "Me. It's my first time." "It's your first time. We're even. Are we?" Julian shifted, pulling Leo up so he was sitting astride him. He felt something stir against him, hard and insistent. "Leo, I think as the one in charge, I have a duty to make sure you review the lesson. You can't learn it all in one go."